Chapter 12. The Brigadier would remember the ride back to unit in Bessie as one of the most hair-raising experiences of his life. Having established who it was that Sarah had followed, the doctor swung the little car around, barely giving Jeremy time to jump in, and took off even faster than when he left the mortuary. It wasn't too bad while they were still shooting through the broad, empty avenues and squares of the theme park, but once they were out into the narrow, crowded streets of Upper Hampstead, their lives were in the hands of the doctor. It could not be said that his skill was unquestionable, as it was questioned, innumerable times, in forceful terms, by many of those on the other end of his near misses and vigorous admonitions. "If you don't know the width of your car, you shouldn't be driving it," he shouted at the elderly driver of an old sit-up-and-beg limousine as he swung out of Platt's Lane into the main road. "For Pete's sake, slow down! You nearly clipped that one," said the Brigadier. "You heard what Jeremy said. Sarah is in the hands of a ruthless sadist. We have to get after her." "What? How?" "In the TARDIS, of course," the doctor said, speeding up even more in an attempt to beat the lights. In this he was unsuccessful. Through the resulting disharmony of protesting car horns, the Brigadier heard a siren obligato. The inevitable police car was after them. "Now you've done it," he said. "Leave the talking to me," the doctor said as he pulled into the side. After a brief attempt to escape was frustrated by the usual Swiss cottage traffic jam. "Good evening, sir," said the large policeman. "Would you be so good as to explain why you are driving down the Finchley Road at 140 miles an hour? The doctor was calm and reasonable. "I can understand your concern, officer," he said. "Indeed, I would commend it. It's perfectly safe, however. Bessie is fitted with—" "Bessie?" "The car. She's contained in an inertial stasis field." "A what?" "It's a primitive form of anti-gravity operating in the horizontal plane," the doctor explained helpfully. "As you know, gravity and acceleration are fundamentally indistinguishable. Einstein showed conclusively that—" The policeman seemed willing to lose the opportunity to increase his knowledge of Einstein's general theory. "Out," he said, in a most impolite manner. "I beg your pardon?" "Out. Get out of the car." The Brigadier felt that it was past time for him to intervene. He leant forward. "Excuse me, officer, may I have a quiet word?" he said. The doctor was still grumbling when he pulled up in the unit car park, having completed the journey at a demure 30 miles an hour. Policemen were all the same, illogical, rigid, domineering. Didn't he realize, thought the Brigadier, that he could have spent the night in the local nick instead of merely receiving a reluctant caution? As the officer had said, he was lucky in his choice of friends. Ignoring Captain Yates's attempts to report a couple of irate phone calls from Professor Willow, he marched into the laboratory, saying that they had more important things to think about than self-important jacks in office. They had to repair the psychotelemetric circuit of the TARDIS for a start. "Otherwise," he said, "we'll never get to Paracon." "What do you mean?" "Well," he said, peering into the slightly sooty tangle of wires on the bench, "we know whereabouts the planet is in the galaxy within a few light-years, don't we?" "Do we?" said the Brigadier. "I do," replied the doctor. "Plug in the soldering iron, will you, Jeremy, old chap?" Jeremy, who had been staring round the room with his mouth agape, came to with a start and hurried to obey. "We could spend an eternity searching, though," went on the doctor, carefully taking a tiny component out of the circuit. "The TARDIS will take us to the right neck of the woods, and then home in on Paracon using this in her psychotelemeter." He produced a roughly folded envelope from his breast pocket. "What is it?" asked the Brigadier. "The hair of the dog, to coin a phrase," said the doctor, carefully unwrapping a microscope slide and examining it closely. "Or rather, the non-dog. I told you it would come in useful." The Brigadier was beginning to experience his usual feelings when dealing with the doctor, that the ground he stood on was not as firm as usual, that the whole world might decide to operate upside down for a while. He clung on to the facts of the case. The immediate thing, the urgent thing, was to try to stop any harm coming to Sarah Jane Smith. "Freeth must be in touch with this man," he said. "If I put the fear of God into him. How long are you going to be, Doctor?" "Long enough for you to make a phone call," answered the doctor, tweaking something deep inside the telemeter. Interrupting his dinner, a fact which he was careful to make clear, Freeth was, of course, most concerned that Miss Smith, through her own foolish curiosity, as he felt bound to point out, was on her way to Paracon. He felt sure that Mr. Tragan would extend to her the hospitality of the corporation and do his best to entertain her during the trip. No, it wasn't possible to get in touch, for technical reasons, as he was sure Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart would understand. And now, if the Brigadier would excuse him? As an exercise in putting the wind up the chairman, it could hardly be counted a success. "And of course," the doctor commented, "if Tragan's into hyperspace by now or out the other side, it's perfectly true that there's no way of contacting him." "I don't know what you're talking about half the time. Well, actually, nearly all the time," said Jeremy, who was holding a selection of screwdrivers, pliers, and more exotic-looking tools. "Does that mean you can't catch them after all? I mean, what about Sarah?" "Don't worry," said the doctor, switching on the circuit, which responded with a solid-sounding hum. "The TARDIS has a trick worth 2 of that up her sleeve. By doubling back in the time vortex, she can effectively start before Tragan. We can be on Paracon waiting for him to arrive." But surely that was impossible, thought the Brigadier. Hadn't the doctor said that even the TARDIS couldn't take you back to put something right if you got it wrong the first time round? "But what about the, limitation thingamy you told me about?" "The Blinovitch limitation effect," said the doctor, unplugging the psychotelemeter, picking it up with eggshell care, and carrying it with the power lead back to the TARDIS. "That only prevents her taking us back into our own past. Really, Lethbridge Stewart, I sometimes think you have a very shaky grasp on the special theory of relativity." Sarah hadn't expected to be tied up. After all, she certainly couldn't escape, or even avoid compliance with Tragan's demands, as she had quickly learnt a few minutes earlier when he had first produced the rope, and what seemed to be a length of clothesline somehow didn't fit the futuristic ambience of the saloon. In fact, when he was tying the knots which secured her to the upright chair by the control desk, he even apologized. "If I had known I was going to have such a stroke of luck, I'd have come prepared," he said. "Do believe me when I say I have far more efficient means of restraint at my disposal at home. I should hate you to think that we don't know how to enjoy ourselves properly on Paracon." "Keep still," he said, giving the rope a vicious tug as she shifted to ease the pain in her arm from the blow which had sent her flying across the room. "But why do you want to tie me up at all? I can't do you any harm." "Ah, well, you see," he answered, "it's all part of the game we're going to play." "What game?" Sarah asked faintly. "It's called, How Far Do I Have to Go Before She—" He paused. "There," he said with a final tug. "That's it. Not too tight. It won't be long now before we make the hyperjump." Sarah just managed to speak. "Before she what?" "Well, that's just it," he answered. "There are so many variations. How far do I have to go before she begs me for a kiss? Starts screaming. Dies." His voice seemed to have become very distant, yet there was no possibility of mistaking his meaning. Jeremy, if he had had any expectations at all, had been thinking that when the doctor had finished his repairs, he would take the circuit thingy outside somewhere and get into some sort of space rocket with the Brigadier, and he would be left standing on the ground, and then what? So when the doctor called him to bring the tools into the old police phone box standing in the corner, he had no idea what was going on. And then the box turned out to be bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. A whole room, with doors and stuff, and this big control thingy in the middle where the Doctor was fitting the psycho-what's-it. It just didn't make any sense, and yet the Brigadier seemed to be taking it all quite for granted. Now the Doctor was adjusting some dials, and the outside doors were shutting. He looked up and saw Jeremy. "What are you doing here, boy?" he said. "You asked me to bring the tools," Jeremy said plaintively. "Yes, well, it's too late now. I've activated the coordinates. You'll have to come too." A thingy in the middle of the thingy in the middle started to go up and down, and a noise came from nowhere, from everywhere, that sounded like the trumpeting of a demented elephant. "What's happening?" gasped Jeremy. "Next stop, Paracon," said the Brigadier. Sarah closed her eyes and took a series of deep breaths. When the swimming in her head cleared a little, she tried to force herself to be objective about her situation. What was it they always said you should do if you were taken hostage? Try to see things from your captor's point of view, treat them as rational human beings in the hope that they would begin to see you as human too? That was it, wasn't it? "I don't think you've thought this through, Mr. Tragan," she forced herself to say. He seated himself on the sofa and stared at her with his empty eyes. "Really? Do tell me. You said that I would be an embarrassment to you on Paracon. Wouldn't a corpse or She couldn't find the words. "A mouthing, white-faced creature scared literally out of her wits," supplied Tragan. Sarah gulped. "Yes," she said. "Wouldn't one of those be even more embarrassing for you?" He didn't answer for a long moment. Could she really be getting through to him? At last he spoke. "Have you ever travelled through space before, Miss Smith?" Sarah hesitated. Would telling a lie help? What was the truth anyway? Did travelling through time count as space travel? "No," she said, hoping it was the right answer. "It's very big, you know. And our garbage disposal system is very efficient. But I do appreciate your concern, believe me." All hope fled. "How can you be so inhuman?" she cried. "Oh, but that's exactly what I am," he answered, as if he were surprised that she hadn't realized the fact. "Indeed, unlike Chairman Freeth and his compatriots, I am only humanoid in the literal sense, in the shape of my body. That is why, when I go on such trips such as the present one, I have to wear this." Tragan put up his hand and peeled off his face. Sarah had thought that nothing could ever make her feel worse than she did when she saw the monstrous dog creature. But now, as well as being frightened, she felt as if she were going to be sick. Yes, the face underneath the face had eyes and mouth in the same relative positions as a human, but there the resemblance ended. A sickly, pale purple. The skin was covered with warts, and what appeared to be suppurating pustules. As if melted by some unburning flame, the substance of his face sagged in liquid folds, which changed shape as Tragan moved. Unlike the passivity of his pseudo-face, which now hung limply from his hand, his expression constantly changed, as if the subcutaneous flesh had a life of its own. But if there were any emotional content, it was so alien as to be unreadable. Sarah, hanging onto consciousness with an almighty effort, turned away her head and screwed her eyes shut. And behind the high white noise ringing in her brain, she heard him laugh. For the first time, she heard him laugh, and she prayed that it might be the last.